I cut my business trip short by a day, eager to surprise my pregnant wife, Sarah. The flight back to Alabama was a blur of anticipation, the thought of seeing her face light up making the hours feel like mere minutes. I imagined her reaction, the joy that would dance in her eyes, and the warm embrace that would follow. As I pulled into our driveway, the house looked as welcoming as ever, bathed in the soft glow of the early evening sun. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, calling out softly, "Sarah, I'm home." But the house was eerily quiet. The usual hum of her favorite show on the TV or the faint sound of her humming in the kitchen was absent. I thought she might be taking a nap, so I decided to keep the surprise intact by not calling out again. I moved quietly through the hallway, my footsteps muffled by the carpet. As I ascended the stairs, I heard faint voices and unsettling sounds coming from the direction of our bedroom. My heart began to pound, a mix of confusion and an unexplainable dread washing over me. I approached the bathroom door, the sounds becoming clearer, moans, and a man's voice murmuring indistinctly. "Sarah," I whispered, barely audible, more to myself than to anyone else. I pushed the door open slowly, and my world came crashing down. There, in the intimate space of our bathroom, was Sarah, entangled with another man. The initial shock was a cold punch to the gut, but it quickly turned to horror as I recognized the man. It was her brother, Mark. "Mark, what the hell is going on?" My voice trembled with a mix of rage and disbelief. Sarah's eyes widened in terror as she saw me. "Jake, I can explain," she stammered, scrambling to cover herself. But Mark, who had always been the more brazen of the two, simply glared at me, a twisted smirk on his face. "There's nothing to explain, Jake. It's exactly what it looks like." I felt a wave of nausea, my legs threatening to give way. "You're her brother," I managed to choke out, my voice cracking. Sarah reached out, her eyes pleading. "Jake, please, just let me explain." But I couldn't listen. I couldn't even process what was happening. Mechanically, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. My hands were shaking as I began recording. "Explain this, then," I said coldly, focusing the camera on their stunned faces. Mark moved as if to come towards me, but I backed away. "Stay where you are, Mark. You don't get to come any closer." His expression turned to one of contempt. "You think you're going to use that against us?" "Against me? I don't know what I'm going to do," I admitted, my voice barely more than a whisper. "But I'm going to make sure everyone knows what you've done." I stumbled out of the bathroom, the walls closing in on me. The betrayal, the sickening reality of it all, felt like a physical weight on my chest. I made my way back downstairs and out to my car, my vision blurred by tears I refused to shed. As I sat behind the wheel, the cold leather pressing against my back, I realized my world had just been shattered. The woman I loved, the life we were building, was all a lie. I didn't know where to go or what to do. But one thing was certain. I couldn't stay in that house, in that nightmare. I turned the key in the ignition and drove away. The image of Sarah and Mark burned into my mind, their voices still echoing in my ears. The road ahead was a blur, but I knew I had to find a way to move forward, to piece together the fragments of my broken life. Leaving the house in a daze, I barely registered the drive to Mark's home. The steering wheel felt like ice beneath my fingers, and the world outside blurred into a smear of colors. My mind replayed the horrifying scene in the bathroom over and over, each iteration a fresh wound to my heart. By the time I arrived, the sky had darkened, mirroring the tumult within me. I stood at Mark's front door for a moment, gathering the shattered pieces of my composure. The door opened before I could knock. Emily stood there, her eyes red and puffy from crying, her face a mask of weariness and sorrow. "Jake?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "What are you doing here?" "Emily." I struggled to find the words, but the weight of the truth pressed down on me. "Can I come in?" She nodded silently and stepped aside, allowing me to enter. The living room was dimly lit, the air heavy with unspoken words. We sat down on the couch, a palpable tension hanging between us. "Emily, there's something you need to see," I said, pulling out my phone with trembling hands. I don't know how to say this, but you need to know." Her eyes widened with a mix of curiosity and dread. "What is it, Jake?" I hesitated, then pressed play on the video. As the images unfolded, Emily's expression shifted from confusion to horror. She watched in stunned silence, tears streaming down her cheeks. When the video ended, she dropped her face into her hands, sobbing uncontrollably. How could they?" She choked out between sobs. "He's my husband, and she's his sister. How could they do this to us?" "I don't know," I replied, my voice breaking. "I don't know how to make sense of any of it, but I thought you should know the truth." Emily lifted her tear-streaked face to mine, her eyes filled with anguish. "I always suspected Mark was having an affair," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I never thought it could be with Sarah, his own sister. This is beyond anything I could have imagined." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared betrayal pressing down on us. Finally, Emily spoke again, her voice barely more than a whisper. "What are we going to do, Jake? How do we move forward from this?" "I don't know," I said, shaking my head. "But we can't let them get away with it. We need to confront them, make them face the consequences of their actions." Emily nodded, a steely resolve hardening her features. "You're right. We can't let them destroy us," and walk away unscathed. We spent the next few hours talking, sharing our pain and anger, trying to piece together a plan. As the night wore on, a fragile bond began to form between us, born out of our mutual suffering. We were two people betrayed by those we loved most, and together, we would find a way to reclaim our lives. By the time I left Mark's house, the first light of dawn was breaking on the horizon. I felt a glimmer of hope amidst the devastation, a sense that, somehow, we would find a way to move forward. As I drove home, my mind was clearer than it had been in hours. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't alone in this fight. Emily and I decided to dig deeper into Mark and Sarah's past. The initial shock and betrayal gave way to a burning need for answers. What kind of twisted upbringing could lead to such unspeakable actions? We began our search in the most logical place, Mark and Emily's home office, a cluttered room filled with stacks of documents and old files. The room was a mess, a testament to Mark's chaotic mind. Papers were strewn across the desk, and old cardboard boxes filled with documents were haphazardly piled in the corners. We spent hours sifting through the disarray, looking for any clue that might shed light on their dark past. "Jake, look at this," Emily called out, her voice trembling with excitement and trepidation. She held up a worn manila folder, its edges frayed and yellowed with age. I crossed the room and took the folder from her, my heart pounding. Inside were old school records, medical files, and social services reports. As we read through the documents, a horrifying picture began to emerge. According to these reports, Mark and Sarah were taken from their home at a young age due to severe abuse. I said, my voice thick with disbelief. Their father was an alcoholic and their mother. She's serving time in a state prison for manslaughter. Emily's eyes widened. So the stories about being raised in an orphanage were lies. They knew their parents all along. They must have created those stories to hide the truth, I murmured, feeling a chill run down my spine. But why? We continued to dig, uncovering more disturbing details. The abuse they suffered was severe, and their mother's crime seemed to be the culmination of years of torment. "I think we need to visit their mother," I said finally, the gravity of our discovery settling over us. "She might have the answers we're looking for." Emily nodded, her face pale but determined. "You're right. We need to know the whole truth." The next day, I drove to the state prison where their mother was incarcerated. The building loomed ahead, a stark contrast to the clear blue sky. Inside, The atmosphere was thick with tension, the clinking of keys and the distant echo of doors slamming, a constant reminder of where I was. After navigating the labyrinth of security protocols, I finally found myself face to face with her. Ruth, Mark and Sarah's mother, was a frail woman with hollow eyes that had seen too much pain. She looked at me with a mixture of curiosity and wariness. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice gravelly from years of silence. "My name is Jake. I was married to your daughter, Sarah," I replied, struggling to keep my voice steady. "I need to understand what happened to them, to both of you." Ruth's eyes flickered with recognition. "You married Sarah," she sighed, a long, weary sound. "I suppose you've seen things you can't unsee." "Yes," I admitted, the memory of that night still fresh in my mind. "But I need to know why. Why did they turn out this way?" Ruth leaned back, her expression a mixture of sorrow and resignation. "It's a long story, one filled with more pain than you can imagine. My husband, their father, was a monster. He did unspeakable things to us. I tried to protect my children, but it wasn't enough." Her eyes filled with tears as she recounted the years of abuse. "I killed him to save them, but by then, the damage was done. They were broken in ways I couldn't mend. When they were taken from me, I thought it was for the best. But now, I see that their demons followed them." I sat in silence, absorbing the weight of her words. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, each revelation more heartbreaking than the last. "I'm sorry," Ruth said, her voice barely a whisper. "I failed them. I failed you." "You didn't fail, Ruth," I said, my own voice cracking. "You did what you could in an impossible situation. But now, Emily and I need to make sure they don't hurt anyone else." Ruth nodded, a single tear trailing down her cheek. "Find the truth, Jake, and do what you must to end this cycle of pain." Leaving the prison, I felt a heavy burden settle over me. The truth was a bitter pill to swallow, but it was also a necessary one. As I drove back to Emily's house, I knew we had to confront Mark and Sarah, armed with the knowledge of their dark past. The road ahead was fraught with danger, but we had no choice. We had to face the darkness head-on, for our sake, and for the sake of anyone else who might be caught in their web of deceit. In the stark, sterile environment of the prison's visiting room, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken sorrows and regret. As I sat down at the metal table, my mind raced with questions and a gnawing sense of dread. The door at the far end of the room creaked open, and Ruth, a frail woman with haunted eyes and a weathered face, shuffled in. She seemed older than her years, a testament to the unimaginable burdens she had borne. "Jake," she said, her voice a brittle whisper that carried the weight of years of suffering. Her eyes, though sunken and tired, held a flicker of recognition. "Yes, Ruth, I'm Jake," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. "I was married to your daughter, Sarah." Ruth's eyes filled with tears as she sank into the chair across from me. "I know who you are. Sarah showed me your picture once. She seemed so happy." I swallowed hard, the memory of Sarah's betrayal still fresh and raw. "Ruth, I need to understand what happened to them. To both of you. I need to know why things turned out this way." She took a deep breath, her hands trembling as she clasped them on the table. "It's a long, painful story, Jake, but you deserve to know the truth." Ruth's voice wavered as she began to recount her tale. Their father, Robert, was a monster. He was an abusive, violent man. He drank constantly, and when he did, he would turn into a different person. He would beat us, and the things he did to Mark and Sarah, no child should ever have to endure. Her eyes filled with tears as she continued. "I tried to protect them, but I was powerless against him. The night I killed him, it was to save them. He had gone too far, and I couldn't let him hurt them any longer." I felt a lump form in my throat as I listened to her story. "You did what you had to do, Ruth. You tried to save them." "But it wasn't enough," she said, her voice cracking with emotion. "The damage was already done. The trauma had seeped into their souls, twisting them in ways I couldn't even begin to understand. When they were taken away from me, I thought they might have a chance to heal. But instead, they turned to each other in the worst possible way. I clenched my fists, anger and sorrow swirling within me. When did you find out about their relationship? Ruth's eyes darkened with shame and regret. It was after they had been taken from me. I managed to stay in contact with them through letters. One day, Mark wrote to me, bragging about their relationship. He seemed proud of it, as if it were some twisted badge of honor. I was horrified, but there was nothing I could do. I was locked away, powerless to stop them. She reached out, her hand trembling as she touched mine. Jake, I failed them. I failed you. But you have a chance to end this. You can break the cycle of pain and suffering that has plagued our family for generations. Tears welled up in my eyes as I met her gaze. How, Ruth? How do I stop this? Seek justice, she whispered, her grip tightening. Expose their lies and their sins. Don't let them continue this twisted legacy. Protect yourself and Emily. You both deserve to be free from their darkness. As I left the prison, Ruth's words echoed in my mind. The weight of her confession pressed heavily on my shoulders, but it also ignited a fierce determination within me. I knew what I had to do. Emily and I would confront Mark and Sarah, armed with the truth and the strength to see justice done. The road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but we would face them together, determined to end the cycle of pain and betrayal that had haunted Ruth and her children for so long. Back in Alabama, the summer heat felt oppressive, mirroring the simmering anger and betrayal Emily and I carried within us. The sun blazed overhead as I pulled into Emily's driveway, a sense of determination hardening my resolve. We had a mission now, and there was no turning back. As I walked up to the door, Emily opened it, her face a mixture of exhaustion and grim determination. Come in, Jake. We have a lot to discuss. The living room, once a place of warmth and comfort, now felt like a war room. We spread out documents, photographs, and the damning video evidence on the coffee table, piecing together the fragments of Mark and Sarah's twisted lives. We need to be smart about this, Emily said, her voice steady but laced with anger. We can't just confront them head-on. We need to gather more evidence, build an airtight case. I nodded, my mind racing. We need to play along, pretend everything is normal. That way, they'll let their guard down, and we can dig deeper. Emily agreed, her eyes flashing with a newfound resolve. I'll keep Mark busy. He thinks I'm still clueless. Meanwhile, you can stay in touch with Sarah. Keep her thinking you're still away on business. Taking out my phone, I typed a message to Sarah, my fingers shaking slightly. Hey, honey. Looks like the trip is going to be extended by a few more days. Missing you like crazy. Love, Jake. As I hit send, Emily watched, a slight smile playing on her lips. Good. That should buy us some time. Days turned into weeks as we maintained the facade of normalcy. Emily and I grew closer, finding solace in each other's company. The shared pain of betrayal and the determination for justice forged a bond between us, one that grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room, Emily and I sat down to finalize our plan. The air was thick with tension, our faces illuminated by the dim glow of the table lamp. We need to hit them where it hurts the most, Emily said, her voice low and fierce. Their reputation, their lies have kept them safe for too long. I nodded in agreement. We can use the video as leverage. But we need more than that. We need witnesses, evidence of their twisted relationship, something undeniable. Emily's eyes narrowed thoughtfully. I've been thinking about that. What if we record a confession? Get them to admit everything on tape. How do we do that? I asked, intrigued. We invite them over, Emily suggested, a cunning smile forming on her lips. Pretend we're having a casual get-together. Once they're comfortable, we steer the conversation towards their past, their secrets. I'll handle Mark. You focus on Sarah. The plan was risky, but it was our best shot. We spent the next few days setting up hidden cameras and microphones, making sure every angle was covered. The tension was palpable, each passing moment bringing us closer to the confrontation. Finally, the night arrived. The doorbell rang, echoing through the house like a harbinger of the storm to come. Emily and I exchanged a tense glance before she opened the door, welcoming Mark and Sarah with a warm, practiced smile. "Hey, you two. Come in, make yourselves at home," Emily said, her voice cheerful. Mark and Sarah entered, their expressions relaxed, unsuspecting of the trap we had set. As we settled into the living room, I forced myself to smile, to act as though everything was fine. "It's good to see you guys. It's been too long." Sarah looked at me, her eyes sparkling. "I missed you, Jake. I was worried about your trip." I nodded, suppressing the surge of anger and revulsion. "I'm back now. Let's just enjoy tonight." The evening wore on, the conversation flowing easily at first, but gradually Emily and I began to steer it towards more personal topics, subtly probing, coaxing them to reveal their secrets. "So, Mark," Emily said, leaning forward slightly, "tell us about your childhood. I remember you mentioned some tough times before." Mark shifted uncomfortably, glancing at Sarah. "Yeah, it wasn't easy, but we got through it, right, sis?" Sarah nodded, her smile faltering. "Yeah, we did." I seized the moment, my voice casual. "It's amazing how close you two are, considering everything." Mark chuckled, a hollow sound. "We've always been close. We had to be." Emily pressed on, her tone light but probing. "Closer than most siblings, it seems." Sarah's eyes darted to Mark, a flicker of fear crossing her face. "What do you mean?" Emily's gaze was steady, unyielding. "I mean, it's clear you two share a special bond. More than just siblings." The room fell silent, the tension thickening. Mark's face darkened, and he opened his mouth to speak, but I cut him off. "Why don't you just admit it?" I said, my voice hard. "Admit what you've done. To us. To yourselves." Sarah's eyes filled with tears, her composure crumbling. "Jake, please. You don't understand." "Then make me understand," I demanded, my heart pounding. "Tell me the truth." Mark's face twisted with anger and fear. "There's nothing to tell," he snapped. "You're imagining things." Emily's voice was calm but insistent. "We know the truth, Mark. We have evidence. It's over." The color drained from Sarah's face as she looked at me, her voice trembling. "Jake, I'm so sorry. It wasn't supposed to be like this." Mark glared at her, then at me. "You're bluffing." I shook my head, pulling out my phone. "No, we're not. We have everything we need. Your relationship, your lies, all of it. It's time to face the consequences." The room fell silent again, the weight of our words hanging in the air. Emily and I watched as the reality of their situation sank in, the facade they had built crumbling before our eyes. In that moment, I knew we had won. The truth, painful and ugly, was out in the open. There was no more hiding, no more deceit. Justice, at long last, was within our grasp. Returning home unexpectedly, I was greeted by the sight I had dreaded yet anticipated. Mark with Sarah again. The scene was all too familiar, their closeness, their intimacy. But this time, I was prepared. Masking my fury, I forced a cheerful demeanor, stepping into the house with a wide smile. "Hey, you two. Didn't expect to see you here, Mark," I said, my voice betraying no hint of the storm brewing inside me. Mark glanced at me, a flicker of surprise crossing his face before he recovered. "Jake, you're back early again. Business trip cut short." "Yeah, lucky me," I replied, setting my bag down. "Thought I'd spend some time with my beautiful wife." Sarah's smile was strained, her eyes darting nervously between Mark and me. "It's good to have you back, Jake." "Thanks, babe." How about we celebrate tonight? A little get-together, just the three of us, I suggested, my heart pounding as I spoke. Mark hesitated, but Sarah nodded quickly. That sounds great. As the evening wore on, we settled into the living room, the tension palpable beneath the surface of our forced camaraderie. I excused myself to the kitchen, where I slipped the pill into Sarah's drink, my hand steady despite the turmoil within me. Here you go, I said, handing her the glass. To a night of relaxation. Sarah took the glass, smiling. Cheers. Mark raised his glass as well, the glint of suspicion in his eyes. Cheers. We drank, the conversation flowing superficially. I kept my tone light, masking the cold calculation beneath my words. An hour passed, and Sarah began to look pale, her hand clutching her stomach. Jake, I don't feel so good, she murmured, her voice weak. I sprang into action, feigning concern. Sarah, what's wrong? Are you okay? She shook her head, her face contorting in pain. I think something's wrong. Mark stood up, panic flashing across his face. We need to get her to the hospital. Now. We rushed Sarah to the hospital, the car ride a blur of frantic movements and shallow breaths. Upon arrival, doctors and nurses whisked her away, leaving Mark and me in the sterile waiting room, the harsh fluorescent lights casting an unforgiving glow on our anxious faces. Hours later, a doctor emerged, his expression grave. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I'm sorry to inform you that Sarah has miscarried. The fetus couldn't survive the trauma. Mark slumped into a chair, his face buried in his hands. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, guilt, sorrow, and a cold satisfaction that the plan was working. Thank you, doctor, I said quietly. Can we see her? The doctor nodded. She's resting now. You can see her, but keep it brief. We entered the room. The sight of Sarah lying pale and fragile on the bed, striking a pang of genuine sorrow within me. Despite everything, a part of me had loved her once. Sarah, I whispered, taking her hand. She opened her eyes, tears streaming down her cheeks. Jake, I'm so sorry. Sheh, it's okay, I murmured, my voice soft. Just rest now. Mark stood at the foot of the bed, his face a mask of anguish. Sarah, Please, Mark, just go, she said weakly, turning her face away. Mark's shoulders slumped as he left the room, and I followed shortly after, the weight of the situation pressing heavily upon me. We returned to the waiting room, where I turned to him. Mark, this has to stop. This relationship, it's destroying all of us. He looked at me, his eyes hollow. I know, Jake, I know. The next few days passed in a blur. Once Sarah was stable and back home, I took the final steps of our plan. Armed with the recording and the medical reports, I filed for divorce, ensuring the evidence would leave no room for dispute. The confrontation with Sarah was bitter and heartbreaking, her pleas and apologies falling on deaf ears. Jake, please, she cried, clutching at my arm. We can work through this. There's nothing left to work through, Sarah, I replied coldly. This is the end. The divorce proceedings were swift. The evidence was overwhelming, and the settlement was in my favor. As I left the courthouse, the weight of the past few months lifted slightly, replaced by a sense of grim resolution. Emily and I met later that evening, the relief in her eyes mirroring my own. It's over, I said, exhaling deeply. She nodded, a small smile forming on her lips. We did it. As we sat together, the future still uncertain but free from the shadows of betrayal, I felt a flicker of hope. We had faced the darkness and come out stronger. Now it was time to rebuild, to find a new path forward, one untainted by the ghosts of the past. With the divorce finalized, I left Alabama behind, determined to start fresh. The past few months had been a whirlwind of pain and betrayal, but now, standing on the threshold of a new life, I felt a flicker of hope. The drive to my new home, a small but charming house in a quiet town miles away, was filled with a mix of anticipation and trepidation. As I settled into my new place, I focused on building a life free from the shadows of my past. Days turned into weeks, and I found solace in the simple routines of everyday life. The peace I had longed for began to take root, though the scars of betrayal still lingered. One sunny afternoon, as I strolled through the local farmer's market, a familiar voice called out to me, "Jake." I turned to see Emily standing a few feet away, her face lighting up with a mixture of surprise and joy. "Emily, what are you doing here?" She smiled, a genuine warmth in her eyes. "I moved here a few weeks ago. Needed a fresh start, just like you." We embraced, the shared pain and experiences creating an unspoken bond between us. As we walked through the market, catching up on our new lives, it felt as though a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "How have you been?" Emily asked, her voice gentle. "It's been different," I admitted. "But good. I'm finding my way, slowly but surely." She nodded, her expression thoughtful. "Same here. It's been tough, but I'm starting to feel like myself again." Over the next few weeks, Emily and I spent more time together, our bond growing stronger with each passing day. We shared meals, took long walks, and talked about everything: our past, our hopes, and our fears. The connection we had forged in the midst of our shared ordeal blossomed into something deeper, something neither of us had expected. One evening, as we sat on my porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of orange and pink, Emily turned to me, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "Jake, do you ever think about what comes next? For us, I mean." I met her gaze, the answer coming easily. "I do. And I think we have a chance to build something beautiful together." She smiled, a soft, genuine smile that reached her eyes. "I feel the same way. We've been through so much, but maybe that's what makes this so special. We understand each other in a way no one else can." As the weeks turned into months, Emily and I continued to build our new lives, supporting each other through the ups and downs. Our shared experiences became the foundation of a relationship built on trust, understanding, and mutual respect. One afternoon, as we sat by the lake, Emily reached for my hand. "Jake, I've been thinking. Maybe it's time we stop running from the past and start truly embracing the future together." I squeezed her hand, a sense of peace washing over me. "I couldn't agree more, Emily. We've come so far, and I believe our best days are ahead of us." Together, we faced the future with a renewed sense of hope and determination. The scars of the past would always be a part of us, but they no longer defined us. Instead, they had become the building blocks of a stronger, more resilient love. As we stood on the shores of the lake, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I knew that this was just the beginning. Emily and I had found each other in the ashes of betrayal and heartbreak, and from those ashes, we had built a foundation for a hopeful future, a future we would face together, hand in hand. In the quiet moments, we often reflected on how far we had come. The pain and betrayal that had once consumed us were now memories, reminders of our strength and resilience. And as we moved forward, we did so with the knowledge that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, we had each other to lean on. "To new beginnings," Emily whispered one evening, raising a glass of wine as we celebrated the anniversary of our new lives. "To new beginnings," I echoed, clinking my glass against hers. And with that, we embraced the future, ready to face whatever came our way, knowing that together we could overcome anything.